In the depths of the Alexandrian night, when the stars aligned in patterns that spoke of forgotten truths, Seraphina knelt before the obsidian altar. The chamber, hidden beneath layers of sand and time, pulsed with an energy that predated empires. Her fingers traced the golden ankh that lay cold against her chest, and she whispered words that had been spoken by priestesses before kingdoms rose and fell. "What price must be paid," she asked the darkness, "for a goddess to forget her own divinity?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and intoxicating. Above her, hieroglyphs seemed to shift in the flickering torchlight, as if awakening from an eternal slumber. She had sought this place for 7 years, following dreams that came to her with the precision of mathematical equations and the tenderness of a lover's touch. Seraphina was no ordinary woman. Born under the sign of the serpent, she had been chosen at birth by the Order of the Celestial Veil, a sisterhood so ancient that even the pharaohs whispered their names with reverence. Her initiation had begun in childhood, with lessons that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. She learned to read the language of symbols, to hear the whispers of stones, and to see the threads that connected all living things. But tonight was different. Tonight, she would learn the truth that had been hidden even from the highest initiates. "Sister," came a voice from the shadows, soft as silk and sharp as obsidian. "You have arrived." From the darkness emerged Nephthys, the keeper of the deepest mysteries. Her eyes held the weight of centuries, and her presence filled the chamber with an otherworldly gravity. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and around her neck hung amulets that pulsed with their own inner fire. "I have felt the calling," Seraphina replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her soul. "The dreams have shown me fragments, but I need to understand the whole truth." Nephthys circled the altar slowly, her footsteps silent on the ancient stone. "The truth you seek, dear sister, is not merely knowledge. It is transformation. It is the story of how divinity chose to experience limitation, how perfection chose to embrace imperfection." She gestured to the walls around them, where murals depicted scenes that no history book would ever record. Long before the first pyramid was conceived, before the Nile learned its course, there existed a consciousness so vast and complete that it encompassed all possibilities. This consciousness was what mortals would later call the divine feminine, the great mother, the source of all things. Seraphina's breath caught as she recognized the central figure in the murals. It was a woman of impossible beauty, her form shifting between human and cosmic, her eyes containing galaxies. "She was perfect," Nephthys continued, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality that seemed to synchronize with Seraphina's heartbeat. She knew all things, felt all emotions, experienced all realities simultaneously, but in her perfection, she discovered something unexpected. Perfection, when complete, becomes a form of isolation. The torches dimmed, and in the growing darkness, the hieroglyphs began to glow with their own inner light. Seraphina could feel ancient memories stirring within her, as if her own consciousness was remembering something it had forgotten. She yearned to experience surprise, Nephthys whispered. She longed to feel the joy of discovery, the pain of growth, the ecstasy of reunion. But how can one who knows everything experience surprise? How can one who is everything experience reunion? The answer came to Seraphina not through words, but through a sudden understanding that bloomed in her consciousness like a lotus opening to the sun. She had to forget, she breathed. She had to divide herself and forget her own nature. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. Nephthys smiled, and in that smile, Seraphina saw the warmth of a mother recognizing her child's first steps toward wisdom. The first spark, as we call it, was the moment when the goddess chose to fragment her consciousness into countless souls, each carrying a piece of her divine essence, but forgetting their true nature. Each soul would journey through experiences, through lifetimes, through loves and losses, gradually remembering who they truly were. The chamber around them began to transform. The walls dissolved, revealing a vista that stretched beyond the boundaries of space and time. Serafina found herself standing in a place that existed before existence, watching as points of light separated from a brilliant source and scattered across the cosmos like seeds on fertile ground. "But why?" Serafina asked, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed the cosmic sacrifice. "Why would divinity choose such suffering?" "Because," Nephthys replied, her form now radiant with the same light as the murals, "suffering is not the opposite of love. Separation is not the opposite of unity. They are the conditions that make reunion possible, that make love recognizable, that transform knowing into experiencing." Serafina watched as the points of light took on forms, became souls, began their journeys through matter and time. Some would become pharaohs, others slaves. Some would be mothers, others warriors. Some would remember quickly, others would take millennia. But all carried within them the same divine spark, the same potential for awakening. "Each soul that awakens," Nephthys continued, "each consciousness that remembers its true nature, brings the goddess closer to experiencing herself fully, not as the distant perfection she once was, but as love that has known separation, as wisdom that has known ignorance, as joy that has known sorrow." The vision began to fade, but its impact remained burned into Serafina's consciousness. She understood now why the Order existed, why they preserved these mysteries. They were the guardians of remembrance, helping souls to awaken to their true nature. But with understanding came responsibility, and with responsibility came a choice that would define the rest of her existence. "You now carry this knowledge," Nephthys said, her voice growing distant as the chamber returned to its physical form. "But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. You must choose how to use what you have learned." Serafina felt the weight of countless lifetimes pressing upon her shoulders. She could see now the threads that connected all beings, could feel the pulse of the divine consciousness working through every soul she encountered. The beggar in the street, the merchant in the marketplace, the child playing by the river, all carried the same sacred essence. "I choose to serve," she said, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised even her. "I choose to help others remember." Nephthys nodded, and as she did, she began to fade like morning mist. "Then your true initiation begins now. Go into the world, but remember, the greatest teachings are not spoken but lived. Be the reminder that others seek." Serafina found herself alone in the chamber, but she no longer felt the solitude that had driven her to seek these mysteries. She was connected to everything, part of a vast tapestry of consciousness exploring itself through countless expressions. She spent the remaining hours of the night in meditation, feeling the goddess's presence not as something distant and separate, but as the very ground of her own being. As dawn approached, she made her way back to Alexandria, but she was no longer the same woman who had descended into the depths. In the years that followed, Serafina became known throughout Egypt as a healer and teacher, though few understood the true source of her wisdom. She spoke to those who were ready to listen, helped souls remember their connection to the divine, and lived as an example of what it meant to be both human and holy. She never married, never had children in the conventional sense, but she mothered countless souls back to their own awakening. Her presence alone seemed to kindle something in others, a remembrance of their own divine nature. As she grew older, Serafina often returned to that hidden chamber, not seeking new knowledge, but communing with the living presence that permeated all things. She understood that her life was both her own journey and a service to the cosmic process of divine self-discovery. On her final night in physical form, as she lay in her simple dwelling overlooking the harbor, Serafina smiled at the realization that death was simply another form of transformation, another step in the endless dance of consciousness exploring itself. Her last words, recorded by a student who kept vigil beside her, were simple but profound. Tell them that forgetting was never the end of the story. It was always the beginning of remembering. Ubay, the Order of the Celestial Veil, preserved her teachings, but more importantly, they preserved the understanding that each soul carries within it the potential for the same awakening. The goddess's choice to forget was not a tragedy, but a gift. The gift of experiencing reunion, of knowing love through the contrast of separation, of discovering joy through the journey back to wholeness. And somewhere, in the space between forgetting and remembering, the first spark continues to burn in every consciousness that awakens to its true nature, bringing the cosmic goddess ever closer to experiencing herself fully through the eyes of love that has known both loss and reunion. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.